we have yet another stimulus package proposal to consider on the proverbial stimulus package ballot box. Now this one's a little bit different than the ones we've seen in the past. In the past we've seen a few different $2,000 a month stimulus proposals, the $2,000 upfront, $1,000 a month, boost debit cards, free rent and mortgage, tax credits, an increase in pay for essential workers, the use of two $1 trillion coins. The creativity here, you gotta appreciate it. However, this proposal today isn't made by legislators. It was made by two scholars from the American Enterprise Institute and Hoover Institution, Andrew Biggs and Joshua Rua. These two propose an alternative stimulus plan on thehill.com that some legislators are now considering. So I'm going to give you all the information you need to know on this proposal. The two argue first that the first round of stimulus payments had many issues, including the $1,200 payments are not stimulating the economy because the economy and local businesses are essentially closed. Instead, the stimulus payments are being used to pay bills, which seems to me like saying the same thing in a different way. The money's being used to pay bills, the money's being used to stimulate the economy. It seems like the same thing, so I don't understand that argument exactly. But nevertheless, they go on to say another issue with the CARES Act, what appears to be a freebie, is not. The stimulus checks are financed by our already hurting deficit and will eventually need to be paid back by the private sector. They say anything we spend to the public sector, it's not just money that's given out, it's not just poof, it's there. Eventually, people and businesses and organizations are going to have to make up for whatever we spend now, is a huge argument of theirs. Finally, they argue that by doing blanket payments to all Americans, it's simply inefficient because some people will receive funds who do not need them, and some people need more than what they received. This seems simple enough. I agree with this, however, there's certain situations and considerations to make here. Let's say you have two people who have the exact same income, let's say $45,000 a year. One of the people is a huge saver, doesn't splurge on anything, has $100,000 in the bank. He's been saving up for years and years. The other person with the same income, $45,000 a year, isn't a saver. They have no money in the bank and maybe even some credit card debt. I believe both those people are equally eligible for payment, no matter if that one person was more diligent on saving or the other. If you're going to send out payments, you kind of got to send them to everyone, I believe. So this is where their idea comes in, though. The idea would be need-based, and that in this plan, someone would be able to borrow, essentially borrow, $5,000 or potentially more from their own Social Security as a form of a stimulus payment. They argue that those who don't need the payment simply won't pull the money, and those who do need the payment can get it at favorable terms, and this causes no increase to the deficit. So here are some more details. The $5,000 payment cut would essentially take off the first 3 months of a person's Social Security benefits when they become eligible in their 60s. And it would simply just start 3 months later than it normally would start. So they go on to suggest that if this goes through legislation, that it should be looked at as a loan with like a 1% to 1.5% interest rate. That way it would make up for anyone who dies before they reach Social Security retirement age, and the system wouldn't lose any money based on this program. Now, this plan is really irking people, and it's extremely hard to find any form of unbiased information on it without people trying to push agendas or their opinion on this or political views or things like that. It was actually really frustrating to find any good information that's just like facts. Because of course the people proposing it have their own views, they're not going to say the downsides of it, the people against it, whatever. So I think the reason for all this anger against it is because we're comparing it to the other stimulus packages on the individual level. On the individual level, this is a much worse deal. I mean, $2,000 just in your pocket, you don't have to pay back later, $5,000 loan. Obviously $2,000 sounds much better for the individual. However, a good thing for the individual doesn't always equal a good thing for the community or the economy as a whole. So I'm trying to look at this on both sides, and I'm going to go over the pros and cons I see. That way you guys can form an opinion based off of just the facts. And remember that as of right now, this is just an idea being tossed around, being looked at. Nothing's set in stone. We don't have the details on certain scenarios and questions asked, who's eligible, who isn't. So I won't have answers to every single question. However, if you have questions about this program, feel free to ask them in the comments, and I'll do what I can to address what is out there. So starting with the pros, no increase to the deficit is a huge pro. As they say, there's no such thing as a free lunch, and if we have two identical plans with the same net benefit to individuals, however, one doesn't increase the deficit and the other does increase the deficit, looking at it purely economically, the one that doesn't increase the deficit is the better plan. But like I said earlier, that doesn't necessarily mean that's the better plan on the individual level. So we have to look at it on both sides. Also, the need-based and opt-in aspects are also good, economic speaking, meaning there's going to be less waste in the system. And I mean, if there's free money on the table, everyone's going to grab it. That's just how the free market works. We saw this with the EIDL grant program where they're like $10,000 to every business. Well, of course, every single business is going to apply. And then 4 million businesses apply and they run out of funds. And there's a nightmare with systems and only 15% of businesses have even received funds. That's just what happens when you give out free funds. If that was a loan even at a 0% interest rate, we wouldn't have seen even 25% as many people apply for it. But once it's free money, that's when we see the craziness. So some of the cons. So this could be a case where you're simply taking a poor person who's poor right now and they're taking away from their future poor self, which is a net negative situation. Need-based or not, it's open to anyone to opt in. So we might see a surge of people who are taking from their future self without much care or concern about what their future self and what their future scenario is going to be, without questions or without thinking about how it's going to be paid back later. The question is, how many people are really going to look at this $5,000 and sit and think like, what are the implications 40, 30, 20 years from now that I'm going to have to deal with later? So the concern is, how long-term are people going to think when looking at this program if they don't absolutely need the funds? If they need the funds, that's different. But it all has to do with what are the other options out there and how easy this is to do. So also, some people may have no choice but to take this self-loan, which is an issue in itself. If you're in a tight spot, maybe you lost your job and this is the only lifeline you have, you're going to take this $5,000 loan, stimulus, and your 60-year-old self is going to have to deal with it, leaving you no options. However, again, we're looking at all the negatives compared to other stimulus packages, not just this package by itself. And lastly, not everyone is eligible for Social Security retirement, which brings up a lot of questions in my mind. This plan only mentions options for those who will receive a Social Security retirement payment at retirement age. But in order to be eligible for Social Security retirement, you have to have paid into the system for 10 years. I mean, there's other cases where there's Social Security disability, spousal benefits, survivor's pay, children's benefits, but this still doesn't include many people. I mean, what if someone is 25 years old now, they've been paying into Social Security for 5 years, they take out this $5,000 loan, and they don't pay into the system anymore, so they aren't eligible for Social Security retirement at retirement age. What happens in a situation like that? I mean, that's just one of many, many questions that we have that there simply aren't answers to yet. I mean, the actual proposal itself isn't super long. It's less than 1,000 words, so there's a lot of situations that we don't have the answers to. A lot of things that if this did go to legislation, it'd have to be written and scenarios addressed and things like that. But I think that's a major issue, that it doesn't really talk about how everyone will receive some form of payment or everyone will be eligible to apply for some form of payment. So maybe this plan would be best in conjunction with another plan or another form of stimulus. I try to keep my mind as open as possible when looking at these scenarios, and try to be as unbiased as possible so I can be objective and give you guys the facts the best I possibly can. Like I said earlier, I believe there's a lot of hate towards this program, but it stems from the bar being set so high. I mean, if we're looking at a $2,000 a month direct free and clear stimulus compared to a $5,000 loan, obviously people are going to be mad when doing the comparison. But if this was a proposal made before anything else was made, people might be more open to it and more receptive and be like, well, you know, at least it's an option. Whether this plan is better or worse or the same effectiveness-wise as other plans, I appreciate that people are digging for creative solutions, and I feel it's important just to put this information out there because one of you might have an idea for, you know, a way to get out of this. No one has all the answers here, so we're all, you know, in this situation together, just trying to figure out how we can get out and, you know, make the economy a little bit better and survive until all this pandemic is over with. So that's all I have on this. Until next time, I'd like to thank you for watching, and I hope you have a profitable day.